Welcome to TrueCrime Unveiled Podcast. Dive deep into the mysteries that captivate us.
If you appreciate this episode, please consider liking and subscribing to support us.
Today we delve into the intricate web of deceit spun by Bernie Madoff, a name synonymous with one of the largest financial frauds in history. For decades, Madoff cultivated an image of success and exclusivity, attracting a clientele of high-net-worth individuals, charitable organizations, and even celebrities. His investment firm, Bernie L. Madoff Investment Securities, LLC, promised consistent returns, seemingly immune to market fluctuations. This apparent stability was the very lure that drew investors in, unsuspecting of the colossal fraud that lay beneath the surface. It was a scheme so meticulously crafted, so audacious in its scale, that its unraveling would send shockwaves through the global financial system and leave countless lives in ruins.
Madoff's operation wasn't a legitimate investment firm. Instead, it was a meticulously constructed Ponzi scheme, a house of cards built on illusion. New investor funds were used to pay returns to existing investors, creating the facade of a thriving enterprise. There were no actual investments, no real profits. It was all a carefully orchestrated charade, sustained by Madoff's reputation and the unwavering trust placed in him. This charade went on for an astonishingly long time, largely due to Madoff's calculated manipulation and the lack of effective oversight. How did he manage to deceive so many for so long?
That's the question we'll be exploring as we unravel the layers of this complex and deeply disturbing case.
The story begins in the 1960s when Madoff founded his firm. Initially, it operated legitimately, focusing on penny stocks and market making. However, the seeds of the Ponzi scheme were sown sometime in the early 1990s, though the exact timeline remains somewhat murky. What is clear is that over several decades, Madoff cultivated an air of exclusivity around his investment advisory business. He fostered an aura of being in the know, of having access to unique investment strategies that yielded consistent, above-average returns. This aura of secrecy and exclusivity became a powerful tool in attracting and retaining investors, many of whom were prominent figures in the financial world.
Madoff's carefully cultivated image played a crucial role in perpetuating the fraud. He presented himself as a pillar of the financial community, a philanthropist, and a trusted advisor. He sat on boards of prestigious organizations and cultivated relationships with influential individuals. This carefully constructed persona helped to disarm skepticism and bolster the trust placed in him. People wanted to believe in his success, and they were willing to overlook certain red flags because of his reputation and the social circles he moved in. This trust became Madoff's most potent weapon. Less than / person 1 greater than. Less than person 1 greater than. Before the storm hit, the world of Madoff's investors was one of quiet affluence. Palm Beach, a haven of manicured lawns and shimmering pools, was the backdrop for many of their lives. Days unfolded with predictable rhythms, leisurely brunches, rounds of golf at exclusive clubs, and evenings filled with the clinking of champagne glasses at elegant galas. These weren't necessarily ostentatious displays of wealth, but rather markers of a comfortable, secure existence built on years of prudent investment. They trusted Madoff implicitly, viewing him not just as a financial advisor, but as a pillar of their community, someone who shared their values and understood their aspirations. The returns he delivered, consistent and seemingly impervious to market fluctuations, allowed them to maintain this lifestyle, to support charitable causes, and to provide for future generations. There was a shared sense of security, a belief that their financial futures were in safe hands. They lived within a bubble of prosperity, unaware of the devastating truth that lay beneath the surface.
Many of these investors weren't just wealthy individuals. They were charitable foundations, universities, and hospitals. Their endowments, entrusted to Madoff, represented the hopes and futures of countless individuals. Think of the medical research that was being funded, the scholarships that were being granted, the social programs that were relying on these steady returns. The ripple effect of Madoff's deception extended far beyond individual portfolios, impacting entire communities and organizations dedicated to serving others. These institutions, much like the individual investors, had conducted due diligence and believed Madoff's operation to be legitimate. His reputation, his long-standing presence in the financial world, and the consistent returns he delivered created an aura of trustworthiness that was difficult to question. They, too, lived in a world where financial security seemed assured, a world that was about to be shattered.
The whispers started subtly, almost imperceptibly, like a faint tremor before an earthquake. Market analysts, puzzled by Madoff's consistent returns in volatile times, occasionally raised questions. These concerns, however, were often dismissed by those within Madoff's circle. After all, he had delivered for decades. Why doubt him now? The prevailing sentiment was one of unquestioning trust, reinforced by the tangible evidence of their growing portfolios. They saw their accounts steadily increase, year after year, reinforcing their belief in Madoff's genius. The idea that it could all be a fabrication, a meticulously constructed illusion, was simply unfathomable. They were living in a carefully constructed reality, a house of cards built on deceit.
The social fabric of these communities was tightly interwoven with Madoff's financial success. He wasn't just managing their money, he was a prominent philanthropist, a respected member of their synagogues and country clubs. He hosted lavish parties, attended charity events, and sat on the boards of prestigious organizations. This deep integration into their social circles further cemented their trust and made it even harder to question his integrity. He was one of them, a trusted friend and advisor, not someone capable of perpetrating such a monumental fraud. Their social lives, their charitable giving, their very sense of community were all intertwined with the man who would ultimately betray them. The foundations of their world were slowly eroding, unbeknownst to them, as Madoff's scheme continued to unravel behind the scenes.
Let's delve deeper into the seemingly ordinary life Madoff cultivated. He resided in a penthouse on Manhattan's Upper East Side, a symbol of success in a city that thrives on it. He owned a beachfront property in Montauk, the summer playground of the wealthy. He vacationed on the French Riviera, sailed yachts in the Mediterranean, and collected expensive watches and jewelry. This image of affluence and normalcy was carefully constructed, a facade designed to deflect scrutiny. It allowed him to move within elite circles, gaining the trust of sophisticated investors who believed he was one of them. This camouflage of ordinariness was, in fact, his greatest weapon, allowing his extraordinary deception to go undetected for so long. It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the most elaborate cons are hidden in plain sight.
Precisely. And within this seemingly idyllic life, a subtle disruption began to emerge. Whispers started circulating in financial circles, rumors of guaranteed returns that seemed too good to be true. Some questioned the consistency of Madoff's profits, even during market downturns. These doubts, however, were often dismissed. After all, Madoff was a respected figure, a former chairman of the NASDAQ stock market, a philanthropist. His reputation acted as a shield, deflecting any serious investigation. The whispers were there, the shadows lengthening, but they were largely ignored, overshadowed by the dazzling image Madoff projected. This initial unease, however, would eventually unravel the entire scheme.
The image of Madoff relaxing on his yacht, the sun glinting off the water, takes on a new, sinister meaning when viewed through the lens of what we now know. The tranquil setting becomes a backdrop for a meticulously orchestrated fraud. The gentle rocking of the waves, once a symbol of peace and leisure, now evokes a sense of unease, the quiet before the storm. The very ordinariness of his life becomes a source of tension, a mask concealing a devastating secret. This contrast between the serene facade and the underlying deception is at the heart of understanding the Madoff case.
The summer house in Montauk, the gatherings of friends and family, the seemingly carefree laughter. All of these images, once representing the rewards of success, are now imbued with a sense of foreboding. They become symbols of a life built on lies, a deception so profound that it touched countless lives. The quiet evenings at the penthouse overlooking Central Park, the clinking of champagne glasses at exclusive parties. These moments of apparent normalcy now carry the weight of the thousands of victims whose lives were shattered by Madoff's scheme. The shadow of the truth begins to creep into the picture, darkening the previously idyllic scene.
Let's delve into the mechanics of Madoff's scheme, specifically how it started, and the initial red flags that, sadly, went largely unnoticed. In the late 1980s and early 1990s, Madoff began attracting investors with promises of consistent, above-average returns, irrespective of market fluctuations. This was achieved through his purported split-strike conversion strategy, a complex-sounding approach that few understood and even fewer questioned. He cultivated an air of exclusivity, making his fund seem like a privileged club. This played on investors' psychology,
creating a fear of missing out on what others seem to be benefiting from. Early investors received regular payouts, which were, in reality, funded by new investments. This classic Ponzi scheme structure allowed the illusion of success to perpetuate for an extended period. However, cracks began to appear, primarily in the form of inconsistencies in Madoff's reported trading activity.
These inconsistencies, while subtle, were crucial missed opportunities to uncover the fraud earlier. For instance, Madoff claimed to be buying and selling options on the S&P 100 index, but the volume of options he reported trading often exceeded the actual market volume for those options. This should have been a major red flag to anyone familiar with options trading. Additionally, his reported returns were remarkably consistent, virtually unaffected by market volatility, which is highly unusual for any investment strategy, especially one involving options. These discrepancies were occasionally noticed by financial analysts and investigators, but their concerns were often dismissed or not thoroughly investigated. The Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC, received multiple tips and complaints about Madoff's operations over the years, yet these investigations failed to uncover the massive fraud. This raises serious questions about the regulatory oversight and the potential influence Madoff wielded within financial circles.
The early victims of Madoff's scheme were often individuals and organizations within his social circle. In Jewish philanthropic communities, this created a sense of trust and further insulated him from scrutiny. Many of these early investors reinvested their profits, further fueling the illusion of success and attracting new investors. As the scheme grew, Madoff expanded his reach, targeting wealthy individuals, charitable foundations, and even international funds. The consistent returns he delivered, combined with his reputation and connections, made his investment fund highly sought after. However, the very foundation of this success was a lie, and the system was inherently unsustainable.
The lack of transparency surrounding Madoff's investment strategy was a critical enabler of the fraud. He provided investors with minimal information about how their money was being managed, claiming it was proprietary information. This secrecy allowed him to operate without genuine oversight. He also discouraged investors from withdrawing their funds frequently, further concealing the true nature of his operations. While some investors questioned this lack of transparency, many were reassured by Madoff's reputation and the seemingly consistent returns they were receiving. This created a dangerous dynamic where trust overshadowed due diligence and critical thinking. The early success of the scheme, unfortunately, became its own best marketing tool, drawing in more victims and escalating the scale of the fraud.
The news of Madoff's arrest spread like wildfire. December 11, 2008, became a day etched in the memories of thousands, marking the beginning of a financial earthquake. Investors who had entrusted their life savings, retirement funds, and inheritances to Madoff's seemingly infallible investment firm were suddenly faced with the chilling realization that it was all a lie. The impeccable returns, the air of exclusivity, the reassuring statements, all just a meticulously crafted facade. Phone lines at the Securities and Exchange Commission jammed, flooded with calls from panicked investors desperate for answers. The initial reports were fragmented, confusing, and often contradictory, fueling the growing sense of dread. There was talk of billions of dollars vanished, of a Ponzi scheme of unprecedented scale. But the full extent of the devastation was still unfolding. This wasn't just about lost money. It was about shattered trust, broken dreams, and the unraveling of lives meticulously built over decades.
The immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of disbelief and confusion. Many investors, particularly those deeply entrenched in Madoff's inner circle, simply refused to accept the possibility of such a colossal fraud. They clung to the hope that it was all a misunderstanding, a temporary setback. Some even defended Madoff, attributing the accusations to jealous rivals or market manipulation. However, as more details emerged, the grim reality began to sink in. The steady stream of revelations painted a bleak picture of a sophisticated scheme built on lies and deception. The Securities Investor Protection Corporation, tasked with recovering assets for defrauded investors, was overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the case. Lawyers scrambled to assess the damage, while forensic accountants began the daunting task of untangling Madoff's intricate web of fabricated transactions.
Imagine the chilling realization that your financial security, your future, was built on nothing but air. The sense of betrayal must have been profound. Many of Madoff's victims were not just wealthy individuals. They included charities, universities,
and pension funds. The ripple effect of his fraud spread far and wide, impacting countless lives. The fear wasn't just about the immediate financial losses, but the long-term consequences. How would people rebuild their lives? How would institutions recover from such a devastating blow? The uncertainty was perhaps the most terrifying aspect of it all. The world as they knew it had changed irrevocably.
The fear quickly morphed into a palpable sense of panic. Suicides were reported, although the direct link to Madoff's scheme was often difficult to establish definitively. Marriages crumbled under the strain of financial ruin, and families were torn apart. The emotional toll was immense. Support groups sprang up, offering a space for victims to share their stories and grapple with the shared trauma. The sense of community, forged in the crucible of this shared tragedy, became a lifeline for many. It was a testament to the human spirit's resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. But the scars, both emotional and financial, would run deep, a lasting reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked greed and unchecked trust.
Let's delve deeper into the psychology of Bernie Madoff. On the surface, he was a pillar of the financial community, a philanthropist, a family man. He exuded confidence and trustworthiness, attracting investors from all walks of life. He cultivated an image of exclusivity, making his fund seem like a privileged club that only the fortunate could join. This aura of success and selectivity only served to reinforce the illusion of security and high returns, drawing in even more victims. But beneath this carefully constructed facade, a different picture emerges. Was this meticulously crafted persona a mask for deep-seated insecurities, a desperate need for validation, or something else entirely? What drove a man who seemingly had it all to perpetrate such a colossal fraud?
It's a complex question, and one that experts have debated extensively. Some believe Madoff exhibited classic narcissistic traits: a grandiose sense of self-importance, a need for constant admiration, and a lack of empathy for his victims. His ability to maintain the charade for so long, even as the scheme grew to unimaginable proportions, suggests a remarkable capacity for self-deception and compartmentalization. He seemed to believe his own lies, convincing himself that he could somehow make it all right in the end, a classic hallmark of a narcissistic personality. Furthermore, his outward generosity and philanthropy could be interpreted as a way of bolstering his public image and assuaging any potential guilt, further blurring the lines between his constructed persona and his true nature.
The sheer scale and duration of the scheme suggest a disconnect between Madoff's outward persona and his inner motivations. While he portrayed himself as a financial wizard, offering consistently high returns regardless of market fluctuations, the reality was that he was operating a simple Ponzi scheme, robbing Peter to pay Paul. This contradiction raises questions about his psychological state. Did he genuinely believe he could outsmart the system indefinitely? Or was he driven by a more self-destructive impulse? Was there a thrill in the deception? A perverse satisfaction in manipulating the financial world and the lives of so many? These are uncomfortable questions, but crucial to understanding the man behind the crime.
Another key aspect of Madoff's psychology is his apparent compartmentalization. He managed to maintain a seemingly normal family life while simultaneously orchestrating this massive fraud. Reports suggest that his wife and sons were unaware of the scheme, raising questions about his ability to separate his fraudulent activities from his personal relationships. This ability to compartmentalize could indicate a sociopathic tendency, allowing him to function normally in one area of his life while engaging in highly unethical behavior in another. It's a chilling thought, and it adds another layer of complexity to the psychological profile of this enigmatic figure. Unraveling these contradictions is crucial to understanding the full scope of the Madoff case and the devastating impact it had on so many lives.
Let's delve into the investigative process, specifically focusing on the period after the initial whistleblower reports. Markopoulos, the independent financial analyst who had been warning the SEC about Madoff for years, was finally taken seriously. The investigation began to pick up steam, but even then, there were missed opportunities and significant delays. One key aspect was the sheer complexity of Madoff's scheme. The fabricated trades, the shell companies, the labyrinthine accounting. It all served to obfuscate the truth and slow down investigators. This allowed Madoff to maintain a veneer of legitimacy for a while longer, giving some investors false hope that their money might be recovered. It's a tragic element of this story, the dangling carrot of potential redemption, when in reality, the house of cards was already tumbling down.
You're right, the complexity was a major hurdle. Investigators were essentially piecing together a massive jigsaw puzzle, with half the pieces missing and the other half intentionally mismatched. Beyond the complex financial instruments, there was also a significant degree of trust placed in Madoff. He was a respected figure on Wall Street, a former chairman of the NASDAQ, and this reputation shielded him from scrutiny for far too long. Investigators initially focused on verifying specific trades, which Madoff claimed to be making, a time-consuming and ultimately fruitless endeavor. Had they looked at the overall structure of his business and its consistent, impossibly high returns, they might have uncovered the fraud sooner. These missed leads allowed the scheme to perpetuate, and the losses to mount, devastating the lives of countless victims.
Another unsettling detail that emerged during the investigation was the almost taunting nature of Madoff's communication. While investigators were painstakingly trying to untangle his web of lies, Madoff continued to project an air of calm confidence, even arrogance. He insisted on his innocence, claiming he was a victim of market forces and rogue employees. There were even reports of him continuing to solicit investments from existing clients, even as the investigation intensified. This behavior not only speaks to his manipulative nature, but also highlights the extent to which he believed he was above the law. It's chilling to consider the audacity of a man facing such serious accusations, continuing to deceive and manipulate those who had already placed their trust and their life savings in his hands.
Absolutely, the psychological aspect of this case is as fascinating as it is disturbing. Madoff's unwavering confidence, bordering on delusion, likely played a significant role in the prolonged duration of the scheme. He seemed to genuinely believe he could outsmart everyone, including the SEC, the financial industry, and the legal system. This self-assured demeanor, combined with the aura of exclusivity surrounding his investment fund, created an environment where few dared to question his methods. The false hope he instilled, even as the walls were closing in, is a testament to his manipulative prowess and the devastating power of blind trust.
The Madoff scheme's implosion didn't just erase numbers on a balance sheet, it shattered lives. Many victims were retirees who had entrusted their life savings to Madoff, believing their financial futures were secure. Suddenly, they found themselves facing destitution, their retirement dreams dissolving into nightmares of financial insecurity. The emotional toll was immense. Reports of severe depression, anxiety, and even suicides emerged in the wake of the scandal. The sense of betrayal was profound, not just from Madoff himself, but also from the institutions that were supposed to protect them. The SEC's failure to uncover the fraud despite numerous red flags further fueled the victims' anger and despair, leaving them feeling abandoned and vulnerable. This wasn't just about money. It was about the loss of security, stability, and trust.
Beyond the individual tragedies, the Madoff scheme inflicted deep wounds on families and communities. Marriages crumbled under the strain of financial ruin, and family relationships were fractured by blame and resentment. The close-knit Jewish community in New York, where Madoff had cultivated a loyal following, was particularly hard hit. Charities and foundations that had relied on Madoff's investments saw their funding evaporate, forcing them to curtail vital services and programs. The ripple effect of the fraud spread far and wide, leaving a trail of broken trust and shattered lives in its wake. The sense of community was deeply damaged, replaced by suspicion and unease. The long-term consequences extended beyond financial hardship, creating a climate of fear and mistrust that lingered for years.
The long-term psychological impact of the Madoff scheme cannot be overstated. Many victims reported experiencing persistent anxiety and difficulty making financial decisions even years after the fraud was exposed. The trauma of losing their life savings, coupled with the betrayal of trust, left lasting emotional scars. Some victims spoke of feeling a sense of shame and embarrassment, despite being the victims of a sophisticated crime. They struggled to rebuild their lives, both financially and emotionally, facing an uphill battle against the lingering effects of the fraud. The Madoff case serves as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of financial crime, not just in monetary terms, but also in the profound and lasting emotional toll it takes on individuals, families, and entire communities.
The Madoff case also highlighted the insidious nature of affinity fraud, where criminals exploit the trust and shared identity of a particular group. Madoff's standing within the Jewish community, combined with his aura of success and exclusivity, allowed him to operate undetected for decades. This case underscores the importance of due diligence and skepticism, even when dealing with individuals who appear trustworthy or share a common background. The emotional toll of such betrayal is amplified by the sense of shared identity, making it even more difficult for victims to come to terms with the deception. It also eroded trust within communities, leaving a legacy of suspicion and caution.
The year is 2008. The global financial crisis is in full swing. Amidst this economic turmoil, whispers about Bernard Madoff's unusually consistent returns began to grow louder. Several investors, despite the widespread market downturn, remained skeptical. They couldn't reconcile Madoff's steady profits with the prevailing market conditions. These suspicions weren't entirely new. Financial analyst Harry Markopoulos had been raising concerns about Madoff's operation for years, submitting detailed reports to the Securities and Exchange Commission as early as 1999. His warnings, however, went largely unheeded. But now, with the financial landscape crumbling around them, investors' anxieties reached a fever pitch. The seemingly unshakable foundation of Madoff's empire was about to crack.
Madoff's sons, Mark and Andrew, also harbored growing unease. They occupied senior positions within their father's firm, but were deliberately kept out of the core investment advisory business. In early December 2008, their father informed them that investors were seeking to redeem a staggering $7 billion. This request, far exceeding the available cash, set off alarm bells. During a subsequent meeting, Bernard Madoff confessed to his sons that his investment advisory business was, in fact, a colossal Ponzi scheme. He revealed that the returns he had been reporting for years were fabricated, and the billions entrusted to him by investors had vanished. Shaken by this revelation, Mark and Andrew Madoff immediately contacted their attorneys. The next day, their lawyers reported the confession to the authorities.
On December 11, 2008, FBI agents arrived at Madoff's Manhattan penthouse. They questioned him about the allegations, and Madoff, seemingly resigned to his fate, confirmed the confession he had made to his sons. Here, he admitted that his entire investment operation was a lie, built on a foundation of deceit and fabricated returns. The scale of the fraud was breathtaking, estimated to involve nearly $65 billion in investor losses. It was a stunning downfall for a man who had once been a respected figure on Wall Street, a former chairman of the NASDAQ stock exchange. Now, he faced the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars.
The arrest of Bernard Madoff sent shockwaves through the financial world and beyond. The sheer magnitude of the fraud, coupled with the length of time it had operated undetected, was difficult to comprehend. Investors, many of whom had entrusted their life savings to Madoff, were devastated. The unraveling of his scheme exposed a web of complicity and regulatory failures, raising serious questions about the oversight of financial institutions. The Madoff case became synonymous with financial malfeasance, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked greed and the devastating consequences of misplaced trust. The investigation that followed sought to untangle the complex web of deceit, identify all those involved, and bring them to justice.
So, we've meticulously dissected the mechanics of Madoff's scheme, the staggering scale of the fraud, and the devastating impact it had on countless lives. We've explored the regulatory failures, the willful blindness of investors seduced by promises of unrealistic returns, and the intricate web of deceit Madoff spun for decades. Yet a chilling question remains. How could such a colossal fraud operate in plain sight for so long? Madoff was a respected figure, a pillar of the financial community, a philanthropist. He moved in elite circles, rubbing shoulders with the wealthy and powerful. How could someone so seemingly reputable perpetrate such an egregious crime? It's a question that speaks to the insidious nature of white-collar crime and the ease with which sophisticated criminals can manipulate systems and exploit trust.
The Madoff case serves as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving. Madoff cultivated an image of success and integrity, using his reputation and social standing to disarm suspicion. He leveraged the inherent human desire for quick riches, preying on the vulnerabilities of those seeking financial security. His scheme was remarkably simple in its core structure, relying on new investments to pay off older ones, a classic Ponzi scheme. But its longevity and scale were facilitated by a complex network of feeder funds, a lack of effective oversight, and the sheer audacity of Madoff's deception. The fact that he operated for so long undetected points to systemic weaknesses within the financial regulatory framework and the inherent difficulties in policing complex financial instruments.
The Madoff case isn't just a story about financial fraud. It's a story about human nature, about greed and deception, about the fragility of trust, and the seductive power of illusion. It's a story that forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our own vulnerabilities and the ease with which we can be manipulated by those who exploit our desires and fears. The sheer scale of the devastation, the shattered lives, the broken families. It's a legacy that continues to haunt the financial world and serves as a cautionary tale for generations to come.
And perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the Madoff affair is the realization that this could happen again. While regulatory reforms have been implemented in the wake of the scandal, the underlying dynamics that allowed Madoff to flourish, the allure of easy money, the pressure to perform, the complexities of the financial system, still exist. As we conclude this exploration of the Madoff Ponzi scheme, we are left with a chilling question. Are we truly any safer today, or are we simply waiting for the next Madoff to emerge from the shadows?
Thank you for walking with us through the shadows. The story doesn't end here. It lingers, echoing through time, reminding us that the darkest truths often hide in plain sight. Until next time, stay curious and stay vigilant.
This case remains unsolved. Perhaps the truth is still out there,